Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Servants. Today we're going to be back into the realm of Gouda Gouda to explore a character that I believe is the worst welfare now that Caster Elizabeth has been buffed, Chacha. Personally, I like Chacha as a character in the Fate universe. She's smug, greedy, goofy, and has some of the most metal animations in the game to counter all that cuteness. Couple that with her being drawn by one of my favorite artists, Paco, and you have a recipe for one hell of a character. But how does she stack up historically? Well, let's find out. Chacha, also known as Yodo Dono, was born in the Sengoku era of Japan. She was the eldest of three daughters to Azai Nagamasa, a daimyo of the period. As Fate players are aware, Chacha is a relative of Oda Nobunaga, as a niece. That is not to say, however, that their family relations were good. Azai would eventually turn against the Oda clan after they declared war on the Asakura clan. Azai would be killed in the conflict involving the Oda. As a result, Chacha's mother and stepfather would commit seppuku, leaving Chacha in the care of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. This adoptive relationship would eventually evolve into Chacha becoming a concubine for Hideyoshi in 1588. For those of you who don't exactly know what a concubine is, it's similar to being a wife but without actually being married, and the man in question is able to have multiple concubines as well as a wife. It's kind of like a harem, but not quite. Anyway, after the Susagi drop plotline, Chacha became pregnant with Hideyoshi's child the following year. In joy, Hideyoshi gifted the entirety of Yodo Castle to her as a present. This joy was because Hideyoshi's current wife was unable to conceive, and as a result of the pregnancy, Chacha became the head wife. This love is where her third skill comes from. This first child was ill-fated, however, and he died soon after his birth. However, she would be able to conceive a successor whom they named Hideyori. They would live happily until Hideyoshi's death in 1598. From here, Chacha became a Buddhist nun and moved into Osaka Castle with Hideyori. It was here that she attempted to rebuild the honor of the Toyotomi clan, and she would eventually become the head of Osaka Castle due to her influence. Her main problem was this: she was a woman in feudal Japan seeking power. While this is of course possible, it is still extremely difficult. Her son was too young to attempt to hold the reins at this time as well, and as a result, the Toyotomi clan lost much of its influence. So, something about Chacha that some of you may know is that she is portrayed in other mediums as well, such as Honkai Impact, Monster Strike, and Seinen Makyo. In these, she appears as a villain. Even in her first appearance in FGO, she's a villain, albeit a goofy one. This is because Chacha stood directly against the Tokugawa shogunate, and was influential enough to be considered a threat to their power. This is despite the fact that her son Hideyori married into the Tokugawa family. She staunchly refused to accept their invitations to become a subordinate clan to the Tokugawas. In 1611, Hideyori and Tokugawa Ieyasu met. Ieyasu had heard that Hideyori was a simpleton and useless, but upon meeting one another discovered quite the opposite. Hideyori had the potential to rule over Japan. This stretched the tendons of the two clans' relationships once again, coming to a head with Hideyori inviting ronin of other enemies of the Tokugawa to gather in Osaka. War would eventually break out between the two clans, with the impetus being Toyotomi's general suggesting that Chacha leave the castle as a hostage as a sign of good faith to the shogun. That way, she would be safe as well if a war broke out. Chacha refused outright and removed the general and all others who she believed were plotting a betrayal. This act led to the siege of Osaka. Chacha would defend her home alongside her son for a while, but after her own personal quarters were destroyed, killing two of her maids and almost her, they signed a short-lived peace treaty. It was Tokugawa Ieyasu who broke this treaty, laying siege to the castle once again. Both Chacha and her son committed seppuku, and the castle was burned to the ground, which now lives on as her noble phantasm. Chacha, to me, is actually not a very unique character in history, but I don't mean that in a bad way. She is a member of a long line of similar females in power who rose through the ranks due in large part to their own abilities and intellect. They had the potential to go on as much more significant historical figures if they had not been struck down so early. When I say she isn't unique, that's because in Chaldea alone there are several servants who met similar fates. Boudica, Zenobia, Joan of Arc, Nitocris, Cleopatra, amongst others, were all killed or died before they could reach their full potential as leaders. In the end, Chacha died to her own loyalty to her family and resistance to the change around her. Historically, this puts her on the bad side. But, as I've discussed in past videos, it's never so black and white. She, along with her son, stood against the growth of an empire. For that reason, she is worthy of the throne of heroes. Unfortunately, that's all that we have on Chacha. She's kind of a footnote in history rather than a historical figure to be talked about herself. She is a footnote in the history of the Tokugawa Empire, as a last remaining vestige of those who would oppose them. Once again, this is not to say that she is an uninteresting or bad character, it's just that there's not very much known about her. But honestly, that's all there is to her for now. Thank you for everyone who stuck through with me to the end. This was a very, very short one. Please let me know what you thought in the comments. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, as it really does help. If you want to hear about a certain historical figure in FGO in more detail, let me know that as well. Subscribe if you are so inclined. Check out my Twitch for significantly less structured content. And until next time, keep your chin up. Peace.